Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. All right. Peep this. Who is the greatest Laker ever? Now, I know that's a loaded question. And the reason why I say that is because it really could depend on who you ask. And it also could depend on the age of the person that you ask. Because if you ask someone who is 35, they may say Kobe Bryant. If you ask someone who's 55, they may say Magic Johnson. So let me start by saying that, one, I think if you're talking about the greatest Laker, I think it's really between those two, Kobe Bryant and Magic Johnson. No disrespect to anybody else who played for the Lakers, but I don't think I'm stepping out on a limb and saying that it's between these two. I think there are a lot of NBA fans who will agree with me. I think there are even more Laker fans who would agree with me. Shout out to the homie, my brother, Baylor the Great. BTG for President is the podcast. He also has another podcast called Open Run with BTG. I know he's going to hear this one, and he may be a little bit mad at me for not asking him to do this one with me. But shout out to BTG. I'll say this. When you're speaking about the players, let's talk about them individually first. Kobe Bryant, Kobe Bean Bryant. I think it's not a stretch to say that he's considered by most to be the second greatest shooting guard of all time, behind one Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And Kobe's career, was in LA. He spent all of his years, I think he was a Laker, 21 years, I think, in the Laker uniform. He was the cornerstone of their franchise. The Lakers dynasty won, 5 NBA? He won 5 NBA titles. Kobe was an elite scorer. In the 5 titles that he won 2 Finals MVPs. And who could ever forget the 81-point game that he had against the Toronto Raptors in a single game? That's second to only Wilt Chamberlain as far as the most points scored in one basketball game. And honestly, there's probably not anybody tougher to defend. He was a tough shot maker. He was a clutch performer. And he was an icon. And he was a kid who was drafted out of high school to come play for the Lakers. And people like Baylor, my man Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast, shout out to the millionaire Uncle Dolomite. People like that, and I mention those two because they're LA kids, young men who grew up in LA. Now they're old geezers. But they're Laker fans, and they grew up and they literally watched Kobe grow up with them, and they grew up with Kobe. Because I think when Kobe got to LA, I want to say he was like 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. And they saw him struggle, and then they also saw him become a superstar. Conversely, Earvin Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson was one of the most dominant players of all time. He is considered by many, and I don't think it's a stretch to say this, one of the greatest leaders of all time. You know what? Let me scratch that. I think he's probably the greatest leader because of his playmaking ability and his high basketball IQ. Much like Kobe, he did win 5 championships, all in a Lakers uniform. And he won 3 Finals MVPs. And, you know, he won the assist title, I think, 4 times. Magic was the catalyst to the Showtime Lakers. And again, a cornerstone athlete who spent his entire career in the City of Angels. And he, like I said, he was the captain. I don't want to say captain of the ship. He was the leader of the Showtime Lakers. So it's safe to say that Kobe and Magic should be honored as 2 of the top 10 performers in the NBA of all time. I don't think putting them in the top 10 is a stretch. Hell, there may be some people that will put both of them in the top 5. You get no argument from me. But it's really hard if you say who's the greatest Laker. Because again, both of them spent their entire careers in LA. So let's start with the obvious. If we're going to compare the two, let's start with the obvious. And then we'll try to come to some type of resolution here. They both won 5 championships. Magic won his championships in 1980, 82, 85, 87, and then 88. So 87 and 88, they went back to back. Kobe won his 5 championships in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2009, and 2010. So he went back to back to back and then back to back. Kobe has one of the most impressive resumes, like I said, winning five rings. Now, of course, he did win those with Shaq. But it was his clutch scoring, his defense, that enabled them to win those titles. Kobe wasn't riding Shaq's coattails. Trust me, he was as dominant, and they made a historic 3-peat. But as dominant as Shaq was inside, Kobe's clutch shot making and perimeter scoring and perimeter defense was invaluable to the team. And then in 2009 and 2010, Kobe, there was no Shaq. You saw Kobe become the Mamba and take his game to the next level and subsequently take his team to the next level. And Kobe is arguably one of the most talented players of his era. Conversely, Magic won his 5 titles, as I mentioned, in the 80s. He was the floor general. I mean, like, he was 6'9", 200-something pounds. He could run the floor like a gazelle. And his court vision was, we had never seen anybody handle the ball and be able to make the passes that he made, set people up, make clutch shots after clutch shots. His battles with Larry Bird from the Boston Celtics were classic. And Magic Johnson, along with Larry Bird, literally and figuratively saved the NBA. I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm not telling you what I read. I'm telling you what I saw with my own 2 eyes. Magic Johnson was one of the reasons why I started watching basketball, even though I was not a Lakers fan. Hell, I wasn't even a Magic fan. I didn't grow to appreciate his game until probably later on in his career. And I'll be honest, for most of Kobe's career, I was a hater. I didn't like Kobe. I didn't like how I thought he got down. I didn't like the fact that he appeared to be copying the GOAT, Michael Jordan. But when Kobe tore his Achilles, something happened for me. and I mentioned this on my podcast before, and it's worth repeating. I came to realize that, like, this guy, he ain't Mike, but he's the next best thing. And he's done all of these things, and he's accomplished all these things, and you have missed out on it. You have been sitting over here hating. You should be watching. And I don't know exactly at what point in time I came to that moment of realization, but I did. And it was after he tore his Achilles. And I was like, I'm going to watch this guy. And I'm going to, not that I didn't watch him before, but I'm going to really watch him and appreciate him and become, more of a fan than a hater. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was waving the purple and gold pom-poms for Kobe, but I had a deeper appreciation for who he was. And I always said, even in my critique and my quote unquote hate for Kobe, I always told people, like, I can't hate on his game. I mean, his game the boy was cold. He was phenomenal. But I do regret the fact that I spent so many years hating when I really should have been watching and appreciating. Because here's the thing, as a fan, you should be able to watch and appreciate other great players. You don't have to hate for that. You can just be a fan of the game and be a fan of what it is that you're seeing, which is great basketball. And I think Kobe did a pretty good job of providing that. It took me a minute to catch on, but I did eventually. And I really do appreciate what he did. Kobe, when it comes to finals MVPs, he won 2 in 2009 and 2010. Magic won 3 in 1980, 82, and 87. Excuse me. I think the other 3, the other 3 finals MVPs that Kobe was involved in went to Shaq. He won all 3 during their three-peat. But I think it goes without saying, even though Shaq won the MVPs, they don't get to the finals without Kobe. So Shaq got the glory, and rightfully so, because Shaq was the most dominant player to ever play the game. But Kobe had to play well for them to win. And if he didn't play well, they weren't going to win. So you can't knock Kobe for that. Magic, conversely, like I said, 3 finals MVPs. Magic was undisputed the best player on the court in, I'd say, 3 of his 5 championship runs. They don't get there without Magic. They don't get there without Magic, and they definitely don't beat the Celtics without Magic. One finals in particular in 1980, he was, and this was his, rookie year? He averaged 21, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, and 3 blocks, while shooting 57% from the field and 87% from the free throw line. And again, it's rare because this is a point guard. And it's, people always remember Game 6 when he stepped in. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was hurt. Magic stepped in and played center and scored 42 points. So they both did their thing as far as finals MVPs. League MVPs. Surprisingly, Kobe Bryant only won 1 league MVP, and that was in 2008. I think when I'm looking at the stats, that's probably the thing that stood out to me. For some reason, I personally thought that Kobe won more league MVPs, but he only won 1. And again, that was 2008. And it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. And, there's some people, I'll put it like this. During that run, go back and look and see who won league MVP, and you won't be surprised. Magic, conversely, won 3 league MVPs in 1987, 89, and as well as 1990. Both were phenomenal when it came to their dominance, and they dominated in different ways. Like I said, Magic in 87, when he won the MVP, he averaged roughly 24 points, 6 rebounds and 12 assists a game. And leading the Lakers to a 65-17 season. And I mean, Magic was clearly one of the best players in the league, and they voted him so at the league MVP. He was the best, period. Those runs were important because not only did it put Magic on the upper echelon as far as talent was concerned, but it made him a household name. I mean, he was already a household name coming out of college. People didn't call him Irvin Johnson. They called him Magic. And me personally, for a long time, when I was a little kid, I thought that was his real name, Magic, because that's what everybody called him. So they both had, dominance as far as MVPs, whether it be in the league or the finals. So if you want to look at another stat, we can take a look at their All NBA teams. Kobe made 15 All NBA teams. He made All NBA first team 11 times, second team 2 times, third team 2 times. Magic made the All NBA team 10 times. For 9 times he was first team All NBA, and once he was second team All NBA. That speaks to how great they were in a league full of stars. And obviously, when Magic played, players weren't as athletic. They might not have been as skilled in some way, shape, or form, but that doesn't diminish the fact that Magic was the best of the best in a league that was the best league in the world. And the same goes for Kobe. Now, here's where it gets tricky because Magic probably could have and would have made more All-NBA teams had he continued to play. But as many of you know, in 1991, Magic retired from the Lakers after revealing that he had contracted HIV. November 7th, 1991. I will never forget that day. I've done an episode about it on this podcast, and it's definitely worth repeating. I won't go into detail about it, but that day was arguably one of the saddest days I'd ever seen. And as Magic stood at that podium telling the world that he had HIV, me and a lot of other people looked at Magic and we didn't believe that he had HIV because he was strong. He was as physically fit as he had always appeared to be. But I know for myself and a lot of other people, we literally thought that might be the last time that we see Magic alive. But it wasn't. But, so he retired, and so he didn't play as long as Kobe did, but he retired and ultimately came back. I want to say he came back in 93, 94, something like that. But that's Magic. And so statistically, they've been on a collision course to some degree. There are more numbers to cover, but first we must take a commercial break. And on the other side of the break, I'll give you some more statistics, and then we'll try to come up with the definitive answer as to who was the greatest Laker. Sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle podcast. And we are talking about who is the greatest Laker. Before the break, I gave you some stats. I'm going to give you a few more before we get out of here. As far as All-Star game selections, Kobe Bryant made 18 All-Star games, and Magic Johnson was selected to the All-Star game 12 times. That was I think what was interesting about those times is they both played in All-Star games when All-Star games actually mattered. Now, I mean, the NBA All-Star game is a joke. I don't even want to get into it, but that's another story for another day. And again, it goes back to Magic's time when he retired. Magic actually retired and then came back in 1992 and played and won the MVP playing in the All-Star game in Orlando. And this was shortly after, testing positive for HIV. And that was an iconic moment, one that we'll never forget. He and Isaiah, his buddy, Isaiah Thomas, going back and forth. But the guys really let Magic feel like he was, back in the mix. And that was good for him because it propelled him to be on the Dream Team later that summer, which I think is the greatest basketball team ever assembled. So yeah, they both went to multiple All-Star games. Now here's where Kobe separates himself from Magic statistically. If we talk about all defensive NBA teams, Kobe Bryant made the all defense team, first team all defense 9 times. Second team all defense 3 times. Magic Johnson made the all defensive team 0 times. Magic really wasn't much of a defender. I mean, like, he's 6'9", but he wasn't going to lock anybody down. Now, he wasn't going to just give up points, but, the Lakers had pretty much like defensive guys, defensive stoppers, like Michael Cooper and Byron Scott. So, Magic really didn't have to do that much defensively. Kobe Bryant was one of the greatest defenders we've ever seen in the NBA in any era. And I put that against anybody. He was just that good. And even in his final years, he still was very good defensively. Kobe really took pride in his defense. Like I said, Magic was 6'9", 210, 215. But he didn't have to guard like the little point guards or anything like that. He was a pretty good guy. He was pretty good at getting steals, but a lot of that stuff came off the ball. But all in all, if you look at their statistics, they kind of run the same. Kobe leads in some, Magic leads in others. So that leads me to the question that I asked when I initially started this podcast. Who is the greatest Laker ever? And again, it really will depend on who you ask. Because I'll use myself and my son as an example. My oldest son, Dion, he's 25. He was born in 1999, right? So one of the first players that he fell in love with when it came to basketball was Kobe Bryant. Now, I have stacks and stacks of VHS tapes of Michael Jordan, and I kind of told myself like I was going to show my son these tapes when he got older so he could appreciate the GOAT and everything. Didn't happen. Now, he has a level of appreciation for Michael. He likes Mike. But Kobe Bryant was his Michael Jordan. And I do remember, Dion early on becoming a Lakers fan. And he's been a Lakers fan all his life. And I have not I didn't want to contribute to that, but he wanted to be. He took the Kobe, and he's always been a Lakers fan, and he still is to this day. And I tell people all the time, like, one of the hardest things that I had to do as a father, I had to call Dion, who was away at college at the time, and tell him that Kobe Bryant had died in a helicopter crash. And I'll be honest, I don't know all of what I said to him that day in 2020, because I was still trying to process it myself, because the only thing that I heard was there was a helicopter crash and Kobe and his daughter was in the helicopter. I didn't assume that they had died. I just heard that they were in a crash. And I'm mentally preparing myself to make this phone call, because at the time, the information was sketchy. And I remember calling him. Well, let me back up. By the time that I called him, it was confirmed that Kobe indeed was on that helicopter, was in that helicopter. And that was a tough call that I had to make. And we didn't stay on the phone long, but breaking that news to him, I don't know how I would have felt if you would have told me that Michael Jordan had died. And I know that, just like anybody else, that Michael Jordan at some point will die. We all will die. But young people don't die in helicopter crashes. It was just weird. And Kobe he seemed to be in such a different space, as far as raising his kids and his family man and all the stuff that he'd been through in the past, the sexual assault case that he had in Colorado. He had grown through that. He had mended fences with people, and he was the cool dad. He was raising his daughters, and it was just different. And so I saw Kobe in a different light. And so, again, going back to that phone call that I had to make to my son at college, it was tough. But I will say this much. In saying all of that, it really reminded me of just how special Kobe Bryant was on the basketball court, and what I thought I learned about him post-career. I liked him even more, because he really seemed like the kind of guy you wouldn't mind kicking it with. And I couldn't say that about Kobe the player, but Kobe the father, Kobe the coach, Kobe the husband seemed like my kind of guy. And Magic, conversely, was always and always will be the life of the party. Magic was always known for that million-watt smile and just an all-around great guy, great businessman. People didn't know that Magic would be the businessman that he became, and he's been incredible from day one. So that leads to the question that I asked. Who is the greatest Laker? If you ask Dion, he's going to say Kobe. He's going to say Kobe all day. And there are many of you who grew up with Kobe, who watched Kobe as a rookie shoot 2 air balls in the playoffs against Utah. I expect you to say Kobe. I'm not mad at you for saying Kobe. Deep down, I think Kobe Bryant, skill-wise, is probably one of the greatest players I've ever seen. But in my opinion, the greatest Laker is Bryant and Magic Johnson. And that's by the slightest of edges. I give him the slightest of edges over Kobe. Because I think in this case, if there was no Magic, there would never be a Kobe. And to come into the league and do what he did, and literally and figuratively save the league, I think that says a lot about about Magic. For Kobe to come out of high school and excel in a time where nobody gave him anything. Keep in mind, when Kobe got to the Lakers, there were already 4 other All-Stars on the team. He literally had to work his way up. He didn't step into it as a superstar. There were a lot of people that when the Lakers made the trade for Kobe Bryant, they heard about his workouts, but nobody's seen the kid play before. Keep in mind, Kobe Bryant wasn't even, what was he drafted, like 12th, 13th, something like that by the Charlotte Hornets? And the Charlotte Hornets have to feel stupid by drafting Kobe and trading him immediately with the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Can you imagine Kobe in Charlotte with the Hornets? I think he still would have been great. Now, would he have won 5 titles? Probably not. But he would have been great. But yeah, for my money, and it's a tough call, but I got to give it to Magic. I just think Magic, he was the epitome of being a Laker, and he was a Laker for life. And he's led the Lakers on the court as a coach, as a person in the front office. I mean, he's still a Laker, and Kobe will always be a Laker. And one of the coolest things that I think you can see is when you walk into Staples Center, which I got a chance to see a couple of years ago when I went out to LA. You walk in Staples Center and you see those jerseys hanging up in the rafters. Number 24 and number 8. And now if you go to Staples Center, you see the statue outside of Kobe Bean Bryant. Again, you get no argument from me if you say Kobe's the greatest Laker. For my money, I'm going with Magic. But again, you get no argument from me if you say Kobe. Kobe Bean Bryant, rest in peace. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and share the podcast. That's very important as well. You can find the podcast on YouTube, youtube.com/12 Kyle podcast. We have both audio and video there. Make sure that you like and subscribe and share it with a friend. Share it with a friend. Share it with a friend. The audio, you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. We're on every major streaming platform. You can follow us on social media at 12 Kyle Podcast, and follow me at 12 Kyle on Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. We also have a Reddit page, Reddit.com/12 Kyle Podcast. Go over there. If you want to continue this discussion, let us know who you think the greatest Laker is. I would love to hear your feedback, or wherever you can leave feedback, whether it be YouTube or Spotify as well. And last but not least, if you would like to contribute to the podcast financially, please do so. Hit us up, $TWELBEKYLE. And we also have merch. Look in the description box. There's a link that says merch. Click that, and you can buy 12 Kyle Podcast hoodies, t-shirts, as well as coffee mugs like the one I'm holding right here. And we got them for the low price. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle Podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle Podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle Podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.